All right, we are going to talk about some of our older restoration sites. We're going to go through 2017 and 2018 and just talk about things that happened while we were planting them and then how they're looking now, a couple years later. All of those sites we've stopped watering, stopped like super weeding. Obviously we go in there and get some big stuff, but we're not micro weeding or anything like that. So they're pretty much on their own, and so we'll show you how they've come along. And I also want to talk about some issues that we've faced, especially in 2018. That was the year that the construction was just getting finished for the coastal biology building and all the paths, and we're seeing now all the impacts that construction had on the restoration sites. And we'll see mostly about soil compaction and how that can affect plant growth. So I'm going to show you one of our sites that was just part of a little belt transect that went all along the paths, and then a bigger chunk of land that was not as compacted and looks way different. So I'll show you those, and Vaughn's going to show you 2017. So here you can see the paths that I was talking about. These run all around the lower terrace on the public part of the reserve. And people use these to walk, ride bikes, etc. They're made out of compacted gravel and sand. I think it's called DG. And anyways, when they were being built by these contractors, they were rolling tractors and compressors and all sorts of things right on the paths and also next to it and all over here. And so that ended up leaving the soil super compacted, which made it really hard for restoration that year. We couldn't get the dibblers in very easily. The water wouldn't even penetrate the soil, and it left the plants just really small for a long time. Like, these plants are going on 3 years old, and they're still just so small. I don't know if you can tell, but they're really small. They should be a lot bigger than they are for being that old. And that's just because their roots can't penetrate the soil, and they're not able to extend. And so it's kind of almost like being in a pot. I don't know how many of you have grown things in pots, but they can't get too big until you transport them into another pot, and then they can get even bigger. So that's kind of what's happening here with compacted soil. And so you kind of see this is what was restored in 2017, nice and big scrub. And then the contractors were in charge of planting plants along the path. And then there's this like awkward kind of bare zone, which is just what we tried to restore, but super compacted soil. So everything's growing, nothing really died, it's just all so small. But at least the weeds couldn't really take over either, because it was even hard for them to grow. So I don't know, awkward zone, but it's very different than most of our other restoration sites. And I'll show you the other bigger chunk of land that we restored the same year in 2018 with much different soil, and hopefully you'll be able to see the difference. I'm standing in the other spot that we restored in 2018. It's a larger little parcel of land, not the little awkward strips along the path. So the soil was not compacted here. And as you can see, the plants are way happier, way bigger. And these were planted at the same time as those other plants. So pretty wild to see. Like, these grasses are waist high. These Symphyotrichum, the Pacific aster, also waist high. Really happy, really healthy, spreading all around. We have yarrow over there going off, and just everything is happy and growing. And this is what it should have looked like in those other sections, but because of the soil being so compacted, the roots didn't have anywhere to go, the water couldn't get to the roots, etc. So this is what normal soil looks like, and yields these nice, tall, happy plants. And yeah, this area also has a wetland that kind of trickles through it. There's a retention pond right in front of that building. Can't really see it, but it fills up with water during the rainy season, and then any extra water goes under the path, and there are these little drainages. Let me see if I can find one. I got some lupin, super happy. Oh, look at this patch. Ooh, yes. Oh yeah, yarrow. Okay, what is it doing? Oh yeah, okay. So, over here, do you guys recognize this plant? It's Juncus patens, so it's one of our wetland plants, and it's doing so well here because the retention pond drains out right over here. I think the pipe got kind of, oh here. So see this pipe in the ground? That will release any extra water straight out into here. So we knew that was going to be the case. So we planted graminoids here. This is Carex harcourtii, Juncus patens, Juncus mexicanus, and some hordeum, which likes wet areas but isn't a graminoid. That's just a grass. Anyways, so nice and wet here. The soil is definitely not compacted here. All the plants are super happy. And the wetland actually kind of trickles down this way across the whole field and goes into another drain over there. So this is what it should look like. And again, remember that this was all planted that same year that I just showed you next to the path.
Right here, we're looking at a plot from our 2017 restoration season. And 2017 was mostly scrub species. So a lot of our bigger forbs, and then kind of our scrub palette, which is Scrophularia californica, that Diplacus auranticus, monkey flower, Eriophyllum staccatifolium, the lizard tail right here. It's this aster. It'll have these bright yellow flowers on it at some point. Here's the monkey flower. And then we seem to have a red morph of this monkey flower as well. And they're might actually be on the same plant. It's really wild. But this is all Aurantiacus. At least it should be. And then right in here is Artemisia californica. And what else? Our classic scrub plant, coyote brush. Here's bee plant and its little flowers. Other things, this is Ericameria ericoides. A little smaller stature. And then we also plant poison oak. That's one of our restoration plants for scrub. So it's around in here. Actually, there's a hummingbird going after the bee plant. It's pretty cool. So as you can see, it's kind of, we basically just kind of meandered through in between the coyote brush. So more of that Ericameria. But we just kind of filled in gaps. And this was primarily what we did for 2017. So kind of filled in these areas here. There's some poison oak that got planted. There's actually a bunch of it. Good old leaves of 3. But it's all in there, so I'm actually not gonna walk in there. this restoration site from 2017, most of them have done really well. There's definitely some kind of, for whatever reason, kind of blank areas like this with mustard and different, it's just different weeds. But species like Eriophyllum, it's just starting to flower here. You can see those classic ray flowers for the asters. It does really well. It spreads like crazy. Growing right in it here is a California rose, Rosa californica. But it kind of takes over a little bit, and that might be a good thing for restoration, might not be a good thing. You don't want just one species in a habitat. You want to have some biodiversity. So, in here we've got Artemisia californica, that sagebrush, and lizard tail or Eriophyllum staccatifolium growing in together. And then down below, which is kind of a bummer, is that Ericomeria. So that, the coyote brush, or those bigger plants like the Artemisia and the Eriophyllum, they kind of grow out and can kind of strangle out the smaller statured plants. They're slower growing. So that's something to think about. California blackberry in here. Another one of those leaves with 3, but it's got these spines on it. We have the non-native Himalayan blackberry, which has a lot bigger thorns, more like rosebush thorns. But this is, for instance, this whole Artemisia is basically one plant. So that's one thing actually to talk about, is that we plant scrub species farther apart. Individuals get planted 2 feet on center instead of 18 inches. So 1.5 feet is our typical restoration planting spacing, and we go 18 inches, or 2 feet with the scrub plants. Poison oak lingering down here, hanging out. But you can see there's a lot of this Eriophyllum. So, and then kind of in between are some of these other species, but it definitely takes over.